Hey folks, this is Jake from So We Flow, and you're listening to the Why We Move podcast. Join me as I speak with incredible movers from diverse disciplines to share their stories and give you practical and inspirational advice on movement and living a happy, healthy life. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, a fanatic or casual, these conversations are for anyone passionate about movement, their minds and their bodies.
What I'm kind of trying to do when I get the group of men together is to kind of like break down these old like stereotypes and these old this old internal conditioning of what it actually means to be masculine, what it means to be a man. And it's not me, like, and I'm not, because who am I to tell someone how to be a man? Like, I know I am one, or I identify as one, but it's getting the group together and then, like, you know, putting out there, like creating space, like holding space for that. Because so you asked me like where it stemmed from. So I'm 30 now. I'm still in my physical prime, like, and I could still be playing top level Super League, international, like I was playing for Ireland, playing for Ireland and stuff, but it just wasn't really aligning anymore with like the next stages of my journey, like my like the levels of purpose. I was like shifting, and when I was. Are we diving straight into it, by the way?
Yeah, mate. We're in it. We're going.
So when I was like young, when I was like late teens, early 20s, I was a bit of like a renegade, and like I got in trouble with the police for fighting, and I was really pushing the boundaries of what I thought it meant to be a man, and like this is what it means. You have to be size. I still do martial arts, but I used to do it when I was younger for how I wanted to be perceived, not like just because I enjoy it, good for like the self-defense aspect. It's obviously the spiritual side of it, and it only ever got me in trouble. Really trying to push the boundaries of what I thought it meant to be a man is to be like strong, to be dominant, like almost oppressive, you know, and to be feared. So I was like a professional rugby player / martial artist, and I was doing it. What I realized was I wasn't doing it for me because I enjoyed it. I was doing it because it's how I wanted other people to perceive me. I wanted to be perceived in this way. And as soon as I kind of realized that, it took me till I'm like 25 to realize that, to be honest. And then obviously then you go through a process of undoing what you thought you wanted, who you kind of thought you are, really. And it was quite the journey. And then, like I say, it only ever got me in trouble. So like, and then I broke down. And then, like, for me, I broke down internally what it means to be masculine. Like, obviously, we talk about masculine and feminine. It doesn't matter like what like physical form you're in. You either got like you're predominantly masculine or you be predominantly feminine. But you integrate the energies in whatever situation. And like, so if you're like driven, you're focused, you're purposeful, you're in your masculine, and you can be a woman doing that, obviously. But then if you're feeling creative, you're feeling lively, like the flow, that's the feminine. And for me, it's like I had to work on integrating the feminine into my lifestyle, because I was just so like driven, go, and I still am now. But I need to learn to soften into certain things. So that's like a brief summary of the journey, how I went from like that to this, but still being in the industry. Obviously, I stepped away from it. I was in France last, and I moved to Cornwall. I was like, I'm done. So I won the grand final with the Rhinos in 2017, and that was like a moment for me where I reached the pinnacle of what I wanted to do from a kid. It's all I ever wanted to do, like win the ring, get the grand final. Like, soon as I did that, I just dropped off the face of the earth for this in terms of my motivation. I was like, well, this is what I always wanted to do, and I've done it. So they also set me on a different journey of like putting something outside of yourself, of the means to give you that like contentment, like full, like contentment forever. Because I could have thought, right, I won the grand final, now I'm just content, now I can pretty much die. And obviously that's not the case. So, and then I went on my more internal journey with meditation, etc., realizing that anything outside yourself that you're hoping to give you that certainty, that contentment, that validation is temporal, because as everything is. So that's what set me on that path again, and that's when my motivation for rugby started to dwindle. And we had a Toronto friend. How into rugby are you?
Not massively, I would say. Aware, but not very knowledgeable.
I went to Toronto. Do you know Sonny Bill Williams?
No.
You know, so it's like the most famous like rugby player. He played for the All Blacks, won 2 World Cups with the All Blacks, used to switch league and union. So I went to the same team as him. We were playing Toronto together, and that they went bust, and they went bust, and I bought me van. We come to Cornwall when COVID hit, and when the team stopped paying us. So I did that, and then when it come back up, I went to France because it's like wasn't as serious as it was when I was in Super League. And then after France, I was like, I'm done. I'm focusing on like the retreats that I run, a few different things, and then it just so happened that bloody Cornwall decided to get a new team. So there's 3 pro leagues. They've got a team in the bottom pro league. So and they reached out, and I had to have a big think about it, whether I was going to have the motivation and stuff. And fortunately, I'm still able to do what I want to do with the retreats and all that. I didn't have to compromise on my kind of new purpose and new journey, and I get to do both. So yeah, that's what's brought me here now. I'm living in Cornwall, living in Newquay, and I'm playing for the new Cornish Rugby League team.
Right, so you're actually down my way more. I live in Newlyn, near Penzance.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So we train in. So it's not the Pirates, by the way. I think people. It's like a brand new franchise. Brand new rugby league franchise, and we're based out of Penryn. So yeah, we are more down. We're more down that way.
Mate, this is literally outside my office.
What, Penryn?
No, Pirates.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
cool.
It's literally there, like out across the road.
All right.
Yeah, I see it all the time. So yeah, going back to the kind of masculine feminine thing, I think it's never something I've been pulled either way on. I think I naturally have always avoided like overtly masculine stuff. But I would say no one's ever really considered me overly feminine either. I think most people would be like, oh yeah, Jake's pretty masculine. But, you know, I think my experience of it is nothing more than, I don't know, that kind of chauvinism at school or like on a night out, like that kind of thing, which was always the sort of thing I avoided. And I never I think you see those overt shows in certain sports, I guess, like it's kind of like a hierarchy kind of thing, status, ego driven. Why do you think there is such like a cultural for the push actions?
So you broke up at that last little bit. Why do I think what, mate?
Why do you think there's in our like especially in the UK, I guess, there's such a push to try and fit into this masculine realm? I know it's getting better nowadays, but there is still huge swathes of people that feel they need to be overly masculine all the time.
Yeah, and I think what comes to me when you ask that is like, I think we need to break it all down, break down what masculinity is, like what it means to be feminine, because like even the word masculine is provocative for some people. You know, it's like a trigger word, and I get it because like the societal misconception of masculinity is like you say, chauvinistic, like macho, especially in a sporting environment. You've got like alpha males trying to topple each other to be the top of the tree. And it's not healthy. It breeds like especially when you're younger. In my initiation, we call it pseudo initiations. Now it breeds the wrong type of masculinity. So for me, if you ask me, like masculinity, like so you call it the core of being masculine. It is what it is. It's more like an energy that we embody, and it's something, and it's got characteristics to it, like strong, like not in terms of physically strong, but like strong values. They're the characteristics of it, and it's about understanding that. So that for me, that's what masculinity is. But somewhere along the line, it's been represented as being being macho and being in the gym, being dominant and opposing to people. So I feel like we need to you ask why it's just because there's a misconception around it. And then I think what do we need to do is we need to break it down, what it actually means to be masculine, and then identify these things that people are pushing too hard to fit that mold. And because you can push too hard to avoid, especially a lot of men. Me included, we push past things we don't want, especially things you don't want to feel. So like we might mistake sadness with weakness, and then what we'll do is we'll push really hard not to feel that sadness because we associate it with weakness, and then we act out, then we're doing fit, then we're being like reckless, you know. So it's about, I think we just need to really and I'm not saying that I've not got the answers at all, but I think as a society we need to break it down, what it actually means, and kind of get rid of, because obviously you hear toxic masculinity and that phrase, and I'm not really a big fan of it, because it's putting the whole of masculinity I know like it's not people what are trying to say, but to someone who doesn't really understand this world, you're just basically tarring it with the same brush. So I'm not really a big fan of it. I think we need to deconstruct what it actually is to be masculine and feminine. Well, if you are predominantly masculine, we need to break it down, like what kind of reinstall the core values of it. Then we reinstall it with ourselves, and then that's when we can represent it to the world in the best way.
Yeah, I agree. Like I don't particularly agree with the term so much either. I think some people say it with the right motivations, but I think other people use it to insinuate that we should be in this world where we're all just neutral and we shouldn't be proud of masculine and feminine traits. And I think that's completely wrong. I think we can all agree we don't want people to be violent, abusive, sexist, racist, like all these kind of things that are associated with toxic masculinity. But we should definitely celebrate our masculinity in all its forms, as long as it isn't harming others, I believe. So in terms of like what are the sort of things that you're doing nowadays in your retreat? Do you run? What are you teaching?
Yeah, so alongside rugby, I've started the retreats, and I've been training in breathwork for the last like 4 or 5 years, and I've now mainly represent. Have you heard of the book The Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McKeown? Yeah. Well, I trained with The Oxygen Advantage and Patrick, and that, because for me it's very heavily like science based, and there's a lot of data to show, and like I know there's more, I'm not a materialist, and I know there's more than meets the eye with everything. But like especially when I'm delivering stuff to men, like me personally, me as well, I like to see why it works. You know, so like you said, do this, but then a lot of it doesn't resonate with a lot of guys and women until you can actually see why. So yeah, that's why I went down after a few. I did like the XPT stuff. But then I went with Oxygen Advantage, and that's who I represent through me breathwork now. So that's what I personally lead on the retreats, and a bit of meditation. Then so the retreat, we just bring a lot of different practices together, like embodiment, physical, stress, challenge, like a well integrated like program. And part of it is to, like, especially, well, part of a retreat, you say, what for me, if you ask why would you go on a retreat? For me, it's to come away from your usual environment, because obviously say you're working a normal 9 to 5, you're doing everything repetitively. So you're just subconsciously driven, you're just doing it all the time. So the retreat is to get you out of that space, to change like the different, it doesn't change the connections in your brain, but it will take you out of it, like help you, like shake you out of it for a little bit. And then when you're in this new space, you're in this new environment, and you're not having to be the provider, you're not having to be all these things, etc. Then you can kind of reevaluate and maybe reassess some new purposes, some new values, and then you can come back to that user environment with a different perspective. So that's what I'd call it. That's why I do a retreat. Especially if you're stuck in like these like negative habitual patterns. But we do breath work. I take that with meditation. We bring different practitioners in. It might be movement practice, might be. So in next month we've got a sweat lodge on it. Are you familiar with a sweat lodge?
I've heard of them. Yes.
Yeah, it's a First Nations ceremony, obviously not North America, so all over like the Americas, and obviously I am conscious that I'm not of that background, so I'm really respectful of the practice, and I just really resonate with Native American culture and how they had such a great working relationship with the land. And I know a facilitator who does it, and he's coming on and he's going to lead. He's going to take that, and that's a super heavy experience. So I feel like ritual ceremony is really important. I feel like we've lost that now, unless you're like a super strict Christian or a Muslim or whatever religion you abide by. I feel like if it's just people who don't necessarily like identify a certain religion, I just feel like we don't have like them like weekly, monthly like Sabbaths or whatever it is to come together and just celebrate life. So all it is a celebration of life, and like no particular ideology attached to it. And so obviously if we're in Cornwall on the retreat, we'll surf, etc. So it's about all these different practices like ice bath, heat stress. So it's just bringing it all together, and then we have a space where we have like campfires in the evening. We'll talk and we'll create like hold that space for like vulnerability. If whatever wants to come up can come up. There's no pressure to talk. Like, I'll lead from my experiences, the convos, and then we'll just see what happens from there. There's absolutely no pressure. So yeah, that's kind of how it looks, depending on where it is, because I don't have a retreat space myself. So you got to get the venues that can like really help it integrate that work.
Yeah, sure.
So,
man.
yeah,
the water crew in Newquay.
Sorry?
Are you part of the cold water swimming crew in Newquay?
Which one? The FCC?
No, there's, I think, what did John say they were called? Feel Cold Collective. It's like a new little thing.
It was me and John who started it.
Oh, was it? I didn't know who was involved.
Yeah, me. Well, there's a few of us who just like started. Basically, when I come down to like Cornwall, I was like, I said, I know people have swam here, of course, swam for hundreds of years. It's not a new thing. I'm aware of that. But like for me, winter can be a gnarly time for people. I personally love it. But so I wanted to bring, originally it was just for men. I wanted to bring a group of men together to come and like get in the cold in the morning. We have a coffee. We have a bit of a coffee club afterwards, a social aspect. And then it just grew. And now we've got like sometimes 20 plus people come in for a swim and a coffee and stuff. And it's created a really nice little community vibe, to be fair. Yeah, I enjoy it.
Awesome, man. Did you go in?
Sorry?
Did you go in this morning?
Yeah, we went in this morning, went to fly settlers bit. Yeah, it was cool.
Cold?
Well, you adapt, don't you? You would like, so like we started in November, and as the water gets colder, you just adapt with. So now it's fat. Obviously, you get an initial shock, especially if you like dive in. But then it's cool, man. Yeah, I love it. Do you cold swim much?
Yeah, I do when I shower always, but when I swim, it's screen at the moment just for business. I know the next year, but yeah, it's weird. The adaptation thing is crazy. I was going pretty much every day in November, and then November's pretty warm. Once it's March now is the worst time. Like March, April, like getting close to summer, it can be pretty brutal until the sun starts coming out a bit more.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's like October into November is like the warmest time of the year. The water's like 15 plus degrees, isn't it?
Yeah, man. So how did you go from rugby to this? I know obviously you do both, but what was the sort of voyage of discovery, so to speak, to be practicing this way?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, obviously, because it's not something you associate with a rugby player, is it?
No.
And especially in my with my like colleagues etc. So yeah, it's that I'm plant based as well, and I don't really shout out about it, but like that's kind of, it's relevant to the story. So I kind of went plant based about 6 years ago. Well, sorry, no, I stopped eating meat about 6-7 years ago, and that kind of, so when I cut out red meat, it's hard to explain, but I started to feel a lot more mentally clearer, and I didn't have this like this like a stored aggression in me that I kind of used to have, and I don't know. I mean, it might be from like the the hormones in the meat, that etc. I'm not here to talk about that, or like this meat etc. It's not what I'm here to do. But that's kind of, I just had this weird mental clarity after it, and so then the more I kind of cut off things, it kind of opened me. It sounds a bit weird, but it opened me up a little bit more spiritually as well. And then I could say I was even though I was like playing at the top, I was playing for Rhinos and competing, like winning trophies and stuff, but I was drinking a lot as well. So I'd be playing a Friday, then say that we wouldn't be until Monday, I'd be out Friday, Saturday, and I'd have these like big benders, and I was just kind of lost a little bit. I was like lacking purpose. And yeah, it was, I remember being hungover, and one morning I was just so hungover, I was just depressed, and I was just like crying. I was just like so like that. I was like, this, it just didn't feel like aligned with who I was. I didn't know where I wanted to go or what I wanted to be, but I just knew the way I was living wasn't authentic. So have you read the book The Power of Now? Probably have, by Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah, a couple of times. I remember the first time I read that, it kind of changed my life in a weird way. I mean, I want to go back to it. It was years ago, absolutely years ago, but I remember it just being such a profound read.
Massively. I feel like it's everyone's like step one into spirituality, isn't it? It's cool. It's the go-to book. So like a friend recommended I read it, and I read it, and it was when I was getting that like period of like where I was a bit lost, and that start point where he talks about when he had that like dark night of the soul, and he said I can't live with myself, and then he was like, well, who am I and who is the self? And then obviously he addressed that like who is the person that is like observing these thoughts and like aware of like the passing thoughts, obviously, because if that thought was there, next thing it's gone, so obviously that's not who you are. So like obviously to shift that identity from each passing thought, and I was just like, boom, I was like, whoa, what the hell? So then that kind of that kind of led me on that journey, and I started meditating, and then from there I just slowly got it. So I was already known as like a hippie for being plant-based in sport, and I was always a bit esoteric, and I still am. But now I'm like the lovable character of like, he moved to Cornwall in his van, now he plays like semi-pro and stuff. So but I had to go through a point of getting through all that, because I copped a lot of stick for it, like off the lads and other teammates, etc., for a good year or so. And but if I wasn't like, if I didn't have a strict conviction to what I wanted to do and like how staying true to my journey, I could have easily just went back into my old habits. But I was really motivated to carry on the direction I was going. And then sooner or later, people accept you for who you are. Like if they're your friends, if they're your teammates, they are going to accept you. It's just about weathering that storm of like, are you going to give in to appease other people, or are you going to stay true to yourself? And that's kind of the journey.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, actually. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. Like, people tend to like bully you, for want of a better way of saying it, when you try and make a change to your life, often for the better, which is just a massive irony, isn't it? And I think if you persevere, then it gradually flips and it becomes something people respect you for and look up to you for, even if it's not to their beliefs.
Yeah, I think definitely, and the respect that you stuck with it, like they know it's like it was different, it wasn't, and they know it was hard, and just the fact that you kind of stayed true, they will whatever it is, they will respect it. And like I used to get guys coming up to me then separately about meditation, about being plant-based and stuff. So in like the pack, they'd like come at me, but then individually I'd start getting lads going, oh yeah, so especially when I'm still performing really well, I'm really fit, and like I'm one of the strongest in the team, etc. And like, oh, so you're plant-based and you're still doing that? And then obviously then they start to ask questions. So for me, it was like I used to try, because when my motivation was dwindling, I had to find something. Well, what are you going to use to motivate yourself? And so I kind of realized that it was like bigger than me, or all of it's bigger than me. And like, if I can represent being a plant-based athlete positively, then it's gonna help other people if they're ever in two minds, like they're ethically conflicted, and but they don't think you can do it because of this reason or that. If they see someone doing it, like, oh, actually, yeah, I can do that. So that was a big motivator for me to stick with it.
I know you said that you don't necessarily want to get into it don't have to talk about it, but what was the motivation to go plant-based?
Oh no, if you ask me, I'll tell you. But I just didn't want to be like them. There's a lot you can like vegans have got a bad name for being like pushy and stuff. So I'm not one of those.
No, to be honest, I try to nutrition like on these podcasts if I can, just because there's a few fundamental principles that are a healthy diet for people, and I don't think that means. I think you can into those either of the pole of extremes of diet. I think everyone's different in terms of like the actual health side. Obviously, the ethical side is completely different. So yeah, if it comes up, it's something that I'm very interested in personally.
Yeah, like look, I agree. Different bodies need different things, like depending on where you're from, your heritage, your ancestry. So I totally agree with that. So but for me, being plant-based is it's been really good for me. Like I know it's not a lot of people struggle with the amount of legumes like black beans, etc. But they seem to work really well with me. So that's all I can go off. But yeah, so it was an always like ethical decision, mainly ethical, because I was thinking I'm like a compassionate person. And then like but then you're disconnected from that, what like you buying that meat in Sainsbury's, what the byproduct of that is, what's happened for it to get there. So then I started to look into that and I was like, well, I for my own value system, I feel like I was being a bit contradictory. So that's why I started. And then I think small scale farming can be generative, especially for the soil, etc. And I don't have a problem with that. But like obviously the mass scale agriculture, tearing down the rainforest, like clearing out land, etc. for cattle, that whatever side you're on, it's not good for the planet. You know what I mean? Like, so that obviously then you got that's the environmental side of it, and then the health side of it, which is obviously up in the air. It's up in the air, like for debate. There's all these like documentaries, isn't there, and stuff, and they do cherry pick for sure, like the game changers, etc. For me, I don't think they should have went about saying, "Oh, be vegan and you can be better." It's just about be vegan or plant-based and you can still compete to that level. That's all you need to do. That should be enough. So yeah, like it was a combination of all three, and it took me a long time to get to plant-based. It took me like 3 years to go plant-based from like cutting out red meat. I remember when I was at Leeds and we used to go for food, because I didn't want to tell anyone I was vegan. I used to not eating meat. I used to take the chicken off the plate and like hide it in a napkin, just because I was surrounded by like 20 dudes who were just like barbarians, and like you can imagine obviously what the grilling you're going to get. And it wasn't because of a curd. I just couldn't bother explaining myself to everyone. Do you know what I mean? To 20 guys to have to explain your decision, and it's just exhausting. So that was my reason for doing that. So yeah, a combination of three to answer your question, like mainly ethical, and then like all you can do is judge it off. It's subjective for me. So how was I adapting to it, and my body felt fine. I felt great. So yeah, they're the main reasons.
That's amazing, man. I've got a few questions surrounding that, but yeah, first I just wanted to kind of, I think I've dabbled either direction. Right now, I do eat meat, and I have done again for a couple of years, but I was vegetarian for quite a few years and dabbled with vegan as well, but it kind of just didn't work for me. And I think on the ethical standpoint, there's so much confirmation out there. Like, I think when we really go deep into it, there's as much argument to say that you shouldn't eat anything rather than just one thing. There's an argument against everything. But just to, ethics aside, a lot of the people that listen to this, like there's many, omnivores as there are vegetarians, as there are vegans. I think there's a whole wide array amongst the community. But from a plant-based perspective, what advice do you have for people who are interested in a plant-based diet or are plant-based already? In what advice do you have for them to make sure it's an optimal diet? Because obviously, as a rugby player, you're a big muscular guy, like performance is essential for you. So what advice do you have?
Yeah, I say there's two things that I normally say. And one of them is research. Obviously, you need to research what you do due diligence in what you're going to replace. So the average meal is like consists of meat and then some sort of veg, then maybe a grain. Like that's what I used to eat anyway. So for me, it's about what you're going to replace that meat with. Because obviously, if you just because you're plant-based, it doesn't mean you're healthy, of course. Mm-hmm. You can eat white bread and Oreos and be vegan, and you're gonna die of malnutrition eventually. So it's about how are you going to replace that meat? What protein source are you going to replace it with? So whether it's like beans, I don't maybe tofu. I don't eat a lot of tofu, but whatever it is. So you need to do your due diligence on what your actual cooking, your diet. And prep. I always say preparation as well. Like you need to prep before, like people do meal prep, etc. Because it's not that easy. Well, it's getting easier now to go out and buy a sandwich, etc. But sometimes it's not. So you're gonna have to do a lot more preparation, like maybe prep lunches if you're going out, because you eat unless like there's like a pret a manger and there's nothing in Cornwall. Somewhere you can get like a decent like quick vegan lunch, you're going to struggle, and then obviously your diet's going to pay. So preparation and research, and they research what you need to replace it with. Obviously, then you're going to get how you're going to get your. Well, to be fair, I feel like we all should supplement B12, just because most of the meat we're getting now isn't being the cattle aren't grazing on like luscious green fields anymore. They're eating a lot of corn, aren't they? So like, I feel like we're all probably need to supplement B12. But then, obviously, like your omega-3s if you're not eating fish, like etc. Like, so you need to look into what you need to replace things with, and just listen to your body. And if like something's not working for you, just experiment and go back. Like at the end of the day, you need to take care of yourself first. So, research, preparation, and listen to your body. And the three big things I always say.
Yeah, awesome, man. I completely agree with that. I think with every diet, we can't just assume that we're covering all the bases. So I think as a vegan, for example, I think it's easy to be dogmatic about it and just be like, just because I've made this choice, it's going to solve all my problems. It's going to make me healthy. But as you say, you can eat shit on any diet. It doesn't matter what your principles are. That's great advice, man. This is obviously a classic vegan point, but I'm not saying it from that angle. I'm actually saying it from something that I believe in. And what's your thoughts on protein sources? Because I'll explain why. So obviously protein has been as this like miracle thing from like, I guess it's come from like bodybuilding and performance. And then in more recent years, there's been a lot of people saying we need way less protein, like recommended, and obviously for like longevity, it's been shown in various studies that the less protein we eat is better for longevity. My personal opinion is that actually I do believe that protein is one of probably the most important macronutrient for various reasons, and that is because it's highly satiating, reduces hunger hormones, which for people that are overweight, I think that's much better than the potential longevity benefits. How have you sort of navigated the world of given the sports that you're involved in and being on a diet which typically people would say is low protein? And I'm not suggesting it is necessarily.
When you talk about the longevity, you're talking about the low BCAA diet increasing some of like the adversity genes. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's if these proteins shows to increase mTOR and IGF-1, which are both like aging hormones. Whereas, but you could argue that it's a low calorie diet would mimic the same effects. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm on about.
Yeah, I get you. That's interesting. I don't know what to say regarding like opposed to like you said the decreasing the hunger hormones, but at the same time, like hunger hormones like ghrelin and stuff are good for releasing growth hormone, isn't it? So like there's like a lot of different ways you can look at that. But to get back to your question, it's quite difficult. I've always been fortunate because I can eat a lot, and like so what I hear a lot of people saying is they struggle to get the amount of protein without the calories on a vegan diet. So yeah, I see what you're saying, but because I eat a lot, I can get the calories and the protein. But when I think it's super. I do think it's super important. Of course, it is, but I still think there's a big misconception of how much protein we need to eat. Like I feel like if you get your calorific requirements, I reckon you're near enough going to get the amount of protein you need. I think it's just because like you see bodybuilders eating like 400 grams a day. Well, have you got an example? Do you have an example of like what kind of amount? What do you think is like necessary for like say someone yours? What do you weigh?
Yeah, so I probably weigh about 85 kilograms. So
what would you try to eat in a day?
I would typically try to eat around 200 grams.
Right.
But I also fare well on lower carbohydrate diet. I eat more of I'm definitely not like a diet or anything, but I would say more like paleo. So I prefer higher fats. So I've always found that if you get right, whatever that may be, I think you can actually, the carbs and fat matter less. It depends more good for you in terms of energy, what you enjoy, how it affects your digestion. So for me, I've always found carbs that affect my digestion badly. So I keep them limited. I get them mainly from like tubers, like sweet potato, fruit, sometimes like white rice, because none of those things affect me. But oats, like whole grains, bread has always like messed me up. So I think you come to a point where you go, are the implications of eating these foods actually worth it for me? And now, I'm 31 and I'm like, you know what? I don't actually just have to eat these foods because people around me are like, they don't do well for me. So, but I know we've gone off topic a bit now, so we'll go back to the protein.
No, yeah, I'd say I'm probably like in between where you are and like really low BCA diets for longevity. Because I don't, because obviously I still need to perform, so I'm not going to decrease my amount of protein and BCAAs. But I do feel like, well, for me personally, I don't need as much protein as someone would recommend for someone who's 108 kilos. You know what I mean? So I just think me personally, that my body does really well on carbs. So like I think I've just got a good balance with the fats. But it makes sense for you, like if you're getting 200 grams of protein, then obviously, like you say, it represses them hunger hormones. So that's gonna make you feel fine. You're not gonna feel like you need to, overindulge on the carby foods, etc. But so yeah, I'm kind of dancing around the question, but I think you need to be conscious. There's definitely a need to be a minimum we need to hit. But for me, I'm just not in the camp of like excess protein. Yeah. But I it's like I probably get between 180 and 200 as well. So I obviously I'm a bit heavier, but I think that for me, I think that's fine.
Yeah, awesome. So we'll go back to kind of the retreats and everything and how you're running those. I'm interested, what's the typical people that end up going on those? Like, given your background in rugby, have you brought from that world into this world?
What was it? Have I brought what from rugby? Sorry, broke up a little bit.
Have you brought the people from rugby into the world that you've discovered?
No, I've not. But even though a lot of players have asked, are keen to come on, but it's never really worked with seasons. Obviously, you can't get like 4 days off to go on a retreat mid competition. So, mate, it's a very diverse and like broad group of people. Like so, like all ages. So the oldest person on the last one was late 50s. The youngest was like 21. All walks of life, all different backgrounds, but a common theme of like there is a common theme, and it's like where they're at in their lives. So obviously the older guys, they might have just been through a divorce and they're kind of like in a transitional period in their life, and they're trying to like reevaluate, refigure like new purposes, new values, what actually is they want to do. And I feel like when they see this and they see a place where, especially talk about like open, like honest conversation, I think it's a good place to go to be vulnerable, because it's only when you put yourself in that in anything in that state of discomfort, whether it be stress, exercise, like cold stress, heat stress, exercise, or public speaking. In like I like to say, like, follow the fear. Like you follow the fear, and that's going to take you into a place outside of, because we like certainty, don't we? We like structure, and if something tries to break up that structure we have of how we perceive life to be, we kind of that's where resistance comes up, and that's where we don't like stuff. So if you can lean into that fear, into whatever it is you're wanting to do, that's where you're going to get the most growth, and because you're in a space where it's not known, and like that's where new things can happen. So I feel like they come into a retreat like this is what they're kind of looking for to do that. And again, with the retreat, I like to stress it's not about try to get away from it's like me, it's Anthony, like the retreat leader, who's like doing this for people. All I'm doing is creating space for people to come. And do these practices, express themselves in a certain way, and like I take from it just as much as the people who come. So if that answers it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I was just interested because I think these sort of alternative practices, for want of a better way of saying it, are becoming more popular in like sports, that more conventional sport, and there's like I think obviously like Richie Norton's like probably the main figure of coming from rugby that's gone into like breathwork and mindfulness and stuff. And there's a few other guys as well. And yeah, I just wondered if it was something that's ever talked about on the training side. These sort of practices are coming in from your perspective.
So sometimes, like, go back to it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Richie. He's a great guy. We're doing something together actually in May or June this summer. So I'm really looking forward to that. He's down here. But yeah, going. So you see it with guys who are struggling. So they might be having like a problem at home, and then they're struggling at training, and then they kind of see me having some sort of like stability, mental stability, just like obviously dealing with, just like when you get to a point, you just deal with life a little bit better. Like you take things for how they are, not without too many preconceived notions about it. And in that, you'd be less emotional to the reaction. So, and they see a change in you. They can see a change in you, and then they come to you then when they're struggling, and it's like, they start asking you about meditation. They start asking you about breath work, etc. But it's never in like a big group thing. But yeah, you hear some talk about yoga. The missus might have made him go to yoga or something like that. And then they might come and say, I listened to that. What's the app? Is it the meditation app, the really popular one?
Headspace. Yeah,
Headspace. They might talk about that, but it's how I found it. There has to be something, just like there was with me. There has to be something that happening in the life to make them want to explore these different avenues or esoteric practices, like you say. So yeah, it's like more, to answer the question. It's a discrete thing. They won't do it in a group, but one-on-one, they'll come to you if they've got something going on. They'll ask about these little practices. So it is there. It's in the back of the mind a little bit. It's just about trying to like make them a bit open and not care, because they care about what the other lads say. So I remember like when I was at Toronto, and say there's a guy who was really getting into this kind of stuff, meditation, etc. And we used to like talk a lot at training when we're doing like some pre-abs, some like mobility before a session, and then all the lads would like joke around and shout stuff like to the other guy, saying, like they're just saying random stuff, like because he's like he was moving into more this side, and he was getting like stick for it. So like they kind of have to cop a bit of stick as well when they come into it, but they don't meet. They're only joking. Like at the end of the day, like if you can withstand a bit of banter from the lads, it's completely fine. It's just like not like giving up because you can't board with a little bit of a roasting in the mornings before training.
What? This is like quite a big question, but why do you think so many men are struggling with the mental health or the satisfaction of the life that they're leading?
I think it comes down to. We talk about purpose, and like purpose. If you are masculine, this is why I think we need to break down masculinity. Because if you are like predominantly masculine. Obviously, when I say that, doesn't mean you don't have like feminine parts as well, but you have an essence, you have a core, and it's either masculine or feminine, I think. And like, then obviously you work with the energies around that, but at your essence, it is one of the two. So if you are masculine, if you are predominantly masculine, like direction and purpose for us, like our like mission in life, that's it. Like you like, this is going to sound a little bit controversial, but like, you really find the guys who've got like a wife and kids. Obviously, they love that like family situation, but they're still, that doesn't massively motivate them. What motivates them is like what the purpose is, what's their project, what's the thing they want to do. That's what really gets a guy going. I don't know if you agree with that, but it is for me, and that's like your purpose. You're like kind of like what's your life mission. So like aligning with that is important. So going back to the question, like in our society, we have like there's like a blueprint of like, you have a purpose laid out for you, and you're told what to do. You've heard it all before. Like, go to school, go to college, blah, get this job, get the wife, get the kids, get that house with like the white fence, etc. And so what happens is, I feel once you get that, you reach that purpose, that society of like painted out for you. You get there, just kind of like me after the grand final, and you'd be like, oh well, this isn't I'm not saying you don't want your partner and the child, that's not what I'm saying, but just because you followed like this blueprint, you're gonna start to feel like a bit hollow. You're like, oh well, this isn't actually what I wanted. And then because you've followed a different path that someone's put out for you, you kind of feel lost. So I feel like there's like a lack of purpose and lack of meaning in a lot of men's lives. So you couple that then with the old stereotype of like being weak and weakness and like showing emotion. So like showing emotion is weak, it's bad. So then we push it all down. We dig it down. Like, it's like trying to put a beach ball in the water. You put it down, it's going to come back up, isn't it? So it's like, so then we've got the two things that are working together. And then I feel that, so that's why I put in, very summarise why I think most men are struggling.
Yeah, I agree. I think we kind of suppress those as a subsection of men. We tend to feel like we have to just like keep on pushing through, and not be open about how we're feeling. I think, and obviously when we do follow like the stereotypical path, as you mentioned, it can feel like we're not necessarily doing it for ourselves. Like I have a wife and a kid. I actually did it backwards. So I did kid, marriage, house, rather than house, marriage, kid. And it was definitely not in any way to try and follow like the stereotypical life pattern. But yeah, I completely agree that whilst my wife and my child are the most important thing to me, and it really does make life worth living, my purpose is something beyond that as well. You need extra, and I think that's probably a big explanation for why most want to go into a career or something else, even whilst having kids, or even put off having kids for that, because there is something more, and there is a lack. We do feel that we need something to strive to in this life, and to give back to the world or contribute something to the world. And I agree that whilst family is an amazing, powerful, rewarding experience, most of us need something more. And it's probably why you don't just retire and just sit doing nothing. Like, a lot of people just feel like they need to be doing something, don't they? They get into gardening, they get into a hobby, like whatever else, you know?
Totally. Yeah. I really resonate with that. And like, say, like, it can be misconstrued. And like, what I mean is, like, again, like being the husband, being the father, like that is you. You're like, you're this provider, and that is amazing. You take care of your family. But then if that's all it was, you just start to like, you start to regress. You need the outlet, and that's for your family, for you to be living your best version of yourself, and you're doing all this. So you, with obviously with your clothing brand, with the movement work you do, that's your obviously passion. That's what drives you. And then once you're doing that, you come back to your family, and then then you're the best version of yourself, because you're not resenting them for you not following this path or etc. So you're being authentic in every like way of your life. So yeah, it's just a balance, isn't it?
Mm. And how do you feel that breathwork, meditation, and the practices that you teach can sort of facilitate that to a happier mental health and a happier like level of satisfaction with your life?
Yeah, it's helped for me. Like what it does is it especially in meditation, like with you just realize what you are not. You realize that you're not that particular thought. You're not that particular emotion that's passing. So like the moment that you realize that you're not at the mercy to that next thought, because if you're at the mercy to that next thought or emotion, you've got to hope it's a good one. Otherwise, you're going to be in a bad mood. So if you can create space from whatever it is and see it for as that and not as something you are, then you just can have a lot more. You can have a lot more mental stability, because you're not always up and down. And then the same goes once you master that. Not master it, because we never master it. It's a lifelong journey. But once you're kind of aware of that, then you can start to deconstruct other things, like the other like conditioning that you've got, and like what you thought you were supposed to be and what you actually want to do, and you can break it down. Obviously then again you look at like the different stresses, like the heat, the cold, the breath work, then that shakes you. Obviously it can be obviously very relaxing as well. So you learn how to that can shake you up, and that can physically get you out of like ruts. So it's combining the mixture of both, you know. Yeah. That's what I feel on it.
Yeah, sure, man. So where can people find what you're doing, find your retreats? I don't know, your social media channels, like where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm mostly active on Instagram, and it's my Instagram handle is Mullally91, and my website, the link in the bio is my website for the next couple of retreats on there. So obviously that's where people can find me, mainly Insta.
And what's the next retreat that's coming up? Next
retreat is in North Yorkshire, at the Broughton Estate, and that's on the 18th to 21st of March. So that's the next one. Then the next one after that is July, and that will be back down in Cornwall in Cudva. It's like me. Have you been to Cudva?
No, but I haven't. But I've got a graphic design business, and one of my clients I've used them as a rest.
Really?
So I've been checking it out. Yeah, it looks really cool, man. And apparently the owner is an absolute boss.
Yeah, Louise. Yeah, she's a legend, mate. Yeah, it's an incredible space though. You should go check out when you can. So it's going to be there, and then we're looking to do one we've not got it set yet, but we'll be doing a retreat in the autumn as well. It's good. I like to work it around the obviously talk about reconnecting with nature. So part of that is kind of like understanding, like flowing with the change of the seasons. So like obviously I celebrate all the solstices, the equinoxes, etc. Or like I'm not pagan, but I believe pagans had a really good, apart from the sacrifices, they had a really good working relationship with the land, and they respected, like, so you come into winter, you're going into the darkness, so it's a time to come inwards, reflect, etc. Spring's new life, new creation, creativity, time to move. So obviously the retreat in North Yorkshire is on the spring equinox, and then the one in summer is near the solstice, not on it, but near it. And then obviously we'll probably do one for the autumn equinox as well. So that's how we try to like plan them, aligning with the changing of the seasons, because it's a good talking point on the retreat as well. Yeah, provides a bit of focus, I guess. Sure. Well, awesome, man. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a great conversation. It's good to get an insight from a different world. Yeah. No, my pleasure, mate. Thank you for having me. It's nice to hear another northern voice down here. Yeah, I know. There's not many, is there? No. All right, take it easy, man. See you, bro.